Good morning, Scott here, known as Cantaloupe to some online, and I'm bringing a video to you on a subject that's interesting to me. It might be of interest to you or someone you know, and I want to talk about prejudice. Perhaps you've heard of prejudice. It's kind of an old subject, a dry subject for some people, but not in the way you've heard. I want to talk about a different type of prejudice. The word itself, let's take it apart real quick, it means prejudgment. It's the subject of prejudgment and everything that connects to it, pertains to it. Prejudice, in the case I want to use it, is about overusing laws before there's a crime. And you might be familiar with this practice, especially if you live in the United States. There's a culture and a climate of prejudiced law enforcement where people are expected to obey the law before there's any kind of problem, regardless of problems or complaints, before there's a problem or complaint. All right, so I want to give an example. This won't be a long video. Consider that crosswalks were a great invention. Maybe we can agree on that. Crosswalks didn't always exist, actually. Before there were vehicles, there were no crosswalks, and for quite some time after the invention of vehicles, modern cars and stuff, there still were no crosswalks until it became a problem where people were, going faster and faster, and there was still pedestrian traffic, obviously, but it started out as a convenience. Here's the point. Crosswalks started out with the spirit of helping people stay safe and cross at intersections without, a lot of, hassle about who has the right of way. If you're in a crosswalk, you have the right of way. And then, eventually, it became a law that vehicles must yield to pedestrians in crosswalks, regardless. And in California, this law has become so extreme that it has defeated the purpose. And here's my point in this video. It has become so extreme and prejudiced that every driver of a vehicle in California is forced to learn the California driver's handbooks and driving codes and pass tests before they get their driver's license. Of course, that's probably a good thing. However, in those books and in the training, they are reminded no less than a dozen times about yielding to pedestrians in crosswalks. And God bless the average person, because they have what I call logical dyslexia. They switch the order of terms in a logic statement, and it changes the meaning of it. So what has started as yield to pedestrians in crosswalks has turned into, in the eyes of law enforcement and the average person in California, yield to crosswalks if there's a pedestrian. You see the switching of order here. So they're not yielding to pedestrians anymore. They're yielding to the whole crosswalk, which has created more problems than they solve. If you are a pedestrian, you know what I'm talking about, especially in suburban neighborhoods where there are a lot of intersections and stop signs and crosswalks. Traffic sometimes pulls up at the exact same moment, and there's this awkward, okay, you have the right of way, and then they have to wait until you completely cross the street because they misunderstand the rule. They don't have to wait beyond a reasonable time. They can actually go as soon as you're out of the way, but they choose not to because typically law enforcement is equally confused about the point of this rule. You're not supposed to yield to the whole crosswalk. You're supposed to yield to the pedestrians, I'm quite sure. The goal, let's remember the goal. The goal is to not run people over. It's to stay safe and to streamline traffic so that people can get to where they're going, whether they're on foot or in a car. It's not to create such a hassle that people start to avoid the crosswalks altogether. Now, here's the funny part. I noticed this whole thing when I noticed myself unconsciously avoiding crosswalks. I'm starting to avoid them because they're more of a hassle than anything. As soon as I get near a crosswalk, an entire intersection will shut down. It's out of control. It is completely out of control. And this might sound crazy if you haven't walked around, but I'm not exaggerating. If you stand on a corner, street corner, any place in this part of the world, in Northern California, the whole intersection breaks down. Traffic comes to a standstill. People get angry. They start yelling and screaming. Cross the road. They insist that you cross the road first, even if you don't have any intention of going anywhere. You're standing there. And this is the product of fear-mongering. Rule by fear-mongering, where you do what you're told, you cooperate, or you're punished. You keep your head down, you don't ask questions, you obey instructions, or else you find yourself cited or in jail. Okay, well, what that does is it makes people paranoid. It makes people yield to the crosswalk because they're not entirely sure. It's not clear, so I'm just going to be safe. And traffic comes to a standstill. You got gridlock. You got people who are unhappy and angry. You got people who are avoiding the crosswalk. It defeats the purpose at this point. Okay, this is a grind my gears video. You know what really grinds my gears? I'll tell you what. I can't stand on a street corner anymore. Every time I walk up to a street corner, somebody's frustrated and waving me along, and then I try to yield because I don't want to have to rush in front of them or have them stare at me, right? So they insist, and I insist, and they insist, and it happens to me 6 times a day. Not exaggerating. Okay, so it's a big deal. It's a big deal. I've found myself avoiding crosswalks because they are more inconvenient than helpful. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe nobody cares if crosswalks are convenient, but it's an analogy for every infrastructure that we have, where it starts out with a good spirit, it starts out with a good idea, some kind of service, something constructive and helpful, but gets regulated to death and threatened, and policies and laws are applied to it to the point where everyone's terrified to even use it, and it defeats the purpose. And it's called prejudice, prejudgment. Let's take that word apart one more time. Prejudgment. Before there has been a call for it, we're going to judge you based on something. We're going to judge that you are not yielding properly if there's anyone near the crosswalk. That's called prejudgment, and it hurts. Reach out with questions or comments down below. Thank you.